very much to Christine and the No to War, No to NATO network for hosting this meeting. I'm speaking to you from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. This is traditional Six Nations territory. And I'm going to give you some background for my trip to Russia. So when I was planning my trip to Egypt to attend the climate summit at Sharm el-Sheikh with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom delegation, I realized that I could get a direct flight from Cairo to Moscow. And as some of you may know, there are no direct flights or no way you can fly from North America or the European Union to Russia. And in fact, the Canadian government has a travel ban, a travel advisory against going to Russia. They say that it's high risk and potentially dangerous. And I really wanted to go. I also have been very concerned that over the past decade, there is just this negativity and hostility towards Russia. There's only, this negative portrayal of Russia from the Canadian government in the Canadian media and by Canadian institutions. And I was, motivated to go to see, to talk to people, to hear the other side, to see if there's anything positive there. And I really wanted to go and see for myself. I was thinking about how my whole life, I'm old enough to live, during the first Cold War, there has just been, this hostility and this enmity construction against Russia. And so I thought, now is the time to go. And also I'm very concerned about the climate crisis, and I don't want this new Cold War. A new Cold War, a new arms race is going to derail the Paris Agreement, derail the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I really want to, end this conflict in Ukraine, end this Cold War, prevent a Cold War. I want to build peace, and I want to meet with Russians and find out what the possibilities are to build peace amongst the people. So I went in the spirit of people-to-people diplomacy, civilian diplomacy, public diplomacy, and really on the shoulders of other feminist peace activists. 40 years ago, the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace, during the height of the Cold War, they led a delegation to the Soviet Union, and they brought Soviet women to Canada in the early 1980s. And so I wanted to do the same thing. And I know that there are other brave American women who did the same thing, like Sharon Tennyson. And so in that spirit, I really wanted to go to Russia. And when I was on the plane from Cairo to Moscow, I did start to feel a bit of anxiety. And I thought to myself, oh, what am I getting myself into here? I had been so indoctrinated just to have such a negative image of Russia that I thought, okay, well, the people at best will be very aloof, and at worst, they'll be aloof, and maybe, at best, they're going to be very unfriendly and unhelpful, and the architecture might be very austere and kind of Soviet style. But I thought, what, I'm going to go, I'm going to tough this out, I'm going to, see for myself. And all of my anxiety dissipated right on the plane. At the first moment, I said to the young Russian man next to me, I said, excuse me, by any chance, can you speak a little English? And he turns to me and he says, yes, in fact, I can speak English, very well. I've been working for the United Nations for the past 7 years. And but he said, my contract has ended because of the sanctions, and I'm returning to Siberia. So this young Russian man had been working for the UN peacekeeping office. He's been doing a helicopter transport in Afghanistan, in Somalia, and in Mali for UN officials, but because of the sanctions, he's no longer able to work for the United Nations, and he's returning to Russia. But he told me so much about the country. He taught me some Russian words, privyet, hello, and spasiba, thank you. And from there, I had just an incredible experience. I spent a few days in Moscow, then a few days in St. Petersburg. I spent every single day working very hard, meeting with Russian people. I organized a number of meetings. I reached out before I went to Russia to MIGMO University, the Moscow State University of International Relations, because I'm a PhD student. I wanted to meet with students and with faculty to hear their side of the conflict. So I spent 4 hours at the university. I attended a seminar with 30 students, and we had an incredible discussion. I heard a range of views. And then I just set up meetings with people from all different walks of life. I traveled as much as I could around the cities. And when I had any breaks, I would go quickly to an important cultural site or museum to learn more. And I was extremely impressed with how kind and friendly and patient and helpful the people were, and how beautiful the architecture, how well maintained the buildings are, how efficient and convenient the public services and public transit are. And I had just a transformative and profound experience. I'm so grateful to the Russian people for giving me a warm welcome from Egypt, and I've made friends, and I can't wait to return. And I said to my husband, as soon as we have money, Russia is going to be at the top of my list to return. And in fact, I've traveled extensively. I've lived in many different countries, and I think it's one of the most beautiful countries that I've ever attended. And I think that there are ways for us to end, to overcome, to transform these sanctions and these borders and this conflict, and to just start building peace, because we cannot afford a new Cold War. We need to, this war is a war that we're all going to lose, and we need to work very hard to end it and to build peace.
Thank you very much, Tamara, for your view of your experience in this country or in these cities. I will give the floor now to Reiner, that he tell us his experience and impressions he had. And maybe I should also say that it's not the first time that Reiner is going to Russia. He is also an expert in Russian politics and working a lot together with Russians. But now you should talk about your experience.
Tamara, I can underline what you were saying. I think you have to love the country. That is a key point. I was going the first time to Russia in 1976 when I was a student. And in 1976, we had the first student possibility with a student train after the Helsinki Agreement to go to Russia. And I was going by the same reason at that time to Russia than Tamara today. I want to see how is our enemy. And I learned a lot of very friendly, very polite people. I was always astonished from that time till today why the people are so polite and nice to Germans after what we have done to these people and to this country. So is what I absolutely can underline. Second point, I can also underline that it's not so easy to go to Russia at that time. Normally Berlin, Moscow is a 2 hours trip, very nice, quick. Now it's a day trip. I was flying over Baku. It was 5 times more expensive than the normal trip, but I really want to go again and want to see how's life there. And you know, I have, since all the years, I have a lot of friends and colleagues in different parts of the society. So I was visiting the Academy of Sciences, the university, above all the Lomonosov University. I was visiting politicians from the Duma, family contacts which I have over all the years. I was visiting the radical left opposition, civil society, peace activists, and others. I will not name any name in the discussion, because of security. The repression in Russia because critical voices is high. They are all easily announced as spy and foreign agents. So I'm very careful to bring anyone in any danger. So I will describe what I saw and what are my impressions. And again, I give impressions. What I'm saying is not a scientific work. These are impressions from a 1-week trip between the 22nd and the 29th of November. And to say that the political positions to the war are deeply diverse in the country. But there's one point that unites quite everyone. Everyone is concerned about the war because the fear that from this war comes a bigger war is very deep, above all by the elder societies, but also by the young people. And the young people, in this case, I have to say the young men are suffering twice because many of them are asked to go to the army, and 700,000. This is a lot of young people left the country when they were called to go to war because they don't want to go to war. But also to say they are not anti-war activists. The majority of them are leaving the country because in their individualistic planning for their life, war has no place. And this is a deep feeling in the society. This war destroyed the development of our country during the last years. Tamara was describing the reconstructions, the redevelopment, all the new buildings, all the new development of the society. This is really impressive. And quite many of these is in danger by this war because the financial resources of the country are now going mainly to the war. There is an anti-war atmosphere there are anti-war activists in parts of the society. There are the feminist voices against war, which are really strong. There are the women and the mothers against war, which want that their sons and the young men are coming home. But again, this group, and to understand the situation in the country, is not really only an anti-war group. Definitely, many of the women are against war, but some of them are saying, we don't want to send our sons to a war which is so bad prepared, which is so ineffective, which is so corrupt by the army, where our young boys don't get a weapon, are not well trained, and don't have good clothes. So this is also an atmosphere that these corrupt country or the corrupt leadership in these countries ruined the country. And this reduced and strengthens the opposition to the Putin regime. Maybe I can't say that this is a position in the whole country, but definitely that is an atmosphere in Moscow and maybe in other big countries. And a third point to the opposition against the war, the feminists, the pacifists, the anti-war, the small anti-war groups, the small anti-war online media, they are really doing a great job, trying to convince the society that the war is bad. They were going at the beginning of the war to thousands on the street. Many of them were put into prison and are now have a court process. But they are really very courageous. And this is the anti-war voices in the society. It is a minority, but they create an atmosphere in the society, or help to create an atmosphere, that you have to do everything to overcome the war. Next point I would like to mention is, when I was going to the Moscow in the 90s, there was a very positive feeling to NATO and even to the United States. This dramatically changed. There's a clear understanding that this war has a prehistory. And the prehistory is the march of NATO and the United States to the east against the agreement from Paris Charter, and I think you all know these stories. I have not to underline this. And there is an atmosphere that we again need a strong Russia as an independent political and social force in the world, and that we have to create a new power for the own country, that this country can survive. Two last sentences. First of all, I read today in the German newsletter that it is difficult to go shopping. This is such a lie, I cannot believe it. When you are going to the supermarkets are full of goods. The interesting point is, in opposition to the horrible, bad German wine, which no one in Germany would drink, you now find the nice Chile and now South African wine. And instead of Danone yogurt, you now find the Turkish yogurt. So there is a transfer of products to from other countries, but the shops are full. For us as Germans, it is even more difficult to go shopping because the value of the euro reduced dramatically. When I was last time there, it was 1 to 80 euro to ruble. Now it is 1 to 58. So the economy is by the first view quite stable. The second view shows there is a lack in many industrial developments of all by high-tech development. This creates problems and will create more problems from the future. You can see this by the airplanes. They are making from 3 airplanes 1, because they were so stupid, the Russians, that they closed their own airplane production and only bought Boeing and Airbus. Now they have the problems. And they are now redeveloping, they are now reindustrialization their country. But this will not go so quick. So there are a lot of impressions which you can say. One impression is the old time of the Putin regime is over. What will be the future is open. You can't see the social forces for changes. You can only fear the atmosphere that something must change for the future. And above all, and this is my final words, I think everyone agreed when I was saying we need ceasefire and negotiation for a peace process. And I think this shows our responsibility and our obligation to do everything that we are coming for a ceasefire and to negotiations. And we need again, and Tamara was saying this, people's diplomacy. So not Tamara and myself should go to Moscow. Many of us who has contact in the past, who had partner organizations in Russia, please keep the contacts, contact your partner, get in contact with them, develop the people's diplomacy. That is my mission. I was saying, without this diplomacy, we will not change the Western politics. So this is a key point for me, that we have to push much more for contacts from organizations, from the peace movement, the trade unions, the churches, the singer clubs, whatever, to get in contact with Russia and to create again an atmosphere that we are together living in the common house of Europe, and that we have to redevelop and recreate this house of Europe. So this is the only positive sense. From at the end, I can say it was also, for me, it was also a quite depressive visit to see the difficult situation, the war atmosphere, and the fear of many, many people when they are looking to the future.
Yeah, thank you, Reiner, for your impressive talk to us. And I will underline what you both have said, the need to come to people's diplomacy. I know in Germany, with the Ukrainian war, racism arises against Russia. They lose their jobs here in the country only because they are Russians and they had worked here since years. And also partnership between cities were dropped down and all contacts were cut. And I think we should see that we can work for this to engage people to have these contacts and build new partnerships and new trust each other. And I would like to ask you both, but Tamara will be the first who will have the floor now. What are the effects of the daily life of the people? You told something, Reiner, about the economy and the products, but do they have enough money to buy these things, or have they a situation like we in Germany with the sanctions that the poverty is growing in this rich country because the prices are going up to the sky and no one knows how to pay for all these, especially for the energy prices and energy in general. But maybe you can give me some impressions from your experience in the last phase. Tamara, the floor is yours.
Christine, just before I answer your question about, daily life for the Russians, I would like to say something more about diplomacy, and I'd also like to share what I heard Russians say about the conflict, because I didn't get that opportunity. And I think that's really important because we really haven't heard the Russian perspective. We aren't including, Russians in our media and on panels and webinars. And so I think it's really important for me to share what I heard. But first, I want to tell you all, because you might not be aware of this, that before February 24th, in the year before, Canadian government officials refused to meet with their Russian counterparts. So as the conflict was escalating, the year before, Moscow had an open invitation to Canadian officials, to come to Russia to meet, to discuss the conflict in Ukraine. But our Canadian diplomats refused to go to Russia. And the Russians also said, look, we'll go to Canada, we'll come to Ottawa and we'll talk and we'll meet with you. But the Trudeau government never extended an invitation. And our most senior diplomat, our Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, refused to meet with Foreign Affairs Minister Lavrov. Canada refused to engage in diplomacy to try to, prevent this escalation and this war that we're seeing underway. And, Canada just escalated, sent weapons in January, sent special forces, sent warships. And the peace movement in Canada, we worked very hard in the months before to call on the Canadian government to engage in diplomacy, to de-escalate, to not send weapons, to not risk a war with Russia, and to support neutrality and no to NATO expansion in Ukraine. But the Canadian government didn't listen to us. And so that was actually what I said to the students and to the Russians that I spoke with, as I want you to know that in Canada, we were very concerned about what was going on, and we tried to prevent our government from, going down this path of conflict and war. And that there were Canadians that don't support what the Trudeau government is doing, continuing to send weapons. But I want to tell you, I've compiled some of the things that the Russians have said to me, and I think it's really important for us to hear, because we are not getting this perspective in our media or by our government. So they said that they feel that the West has been at war with Russia since at least the Western-backed coup in 2014, and there has never been a full and honest investigation into that coup in 2014 that has led us to this moment. Many Russians have family and friends who live in Ukraine on both the west side and on the east, in the Donbass area. They told me that NATO-backed Ukrainian security forces have destroyed their homes in the Donbass, in the Luhansk People's Republic and in the Donetsk People's Republic. They have killed and injured their loved ones. over the past 8 years. So one of the girls was telling me that, one of the young women was telling me that her mother's best friend in Donetsk was shot in the head by a Ukrainian sniper. And these kinds of things have been going on. And, and others have told me that their father, their parents are separated, his house was destroyed. And from their perspective, Russia is defending the Russian-speaking Ukrainian minority in the East, and that some have told me they have brothers, they have uncles who are serving in the Russian military, and that they're doing an important job by defending the people. And they also say that they have been very concerned over the past decade, all of the anti-Russia laws that have been passed in the Ukraine. So preventing the Russian language from being spoken, Russian education and culture. And they also told me that they don't want this conflict. They want the war to end. They believe that President Putin and the Russian government for many years have made overtures to try to de-escalate, to prevent this conflict, that there were peace proposals like the Minsk agreements put forward that were ignored by Ukraine and the West. So they do want negotiations. They say that they believe that Putin and the Russian government are ready for negotiations. They don't want the sanctions and the isolation. They believe that it's forms of collective punishment, that there's a hypocrisy and a double standard that we aren't applying to ourselves in the West. The Americans never, Americans, Germans, Canadians have never been held accountable for what NATO's done to the former Yugoslavia, to Libya, to Iraq, to Afghanistan, and they absolutely don't support NATO, and they can't believe that we've put our soldiers, our tanks, our fighter jets, our warships right on their border. What are we doing? What are we doing? And they did say to me, I had some private conversations, a professor and a student and a Rotarian, asked to have private meetings with me. They said that there is a silencing of dissent and debate. They can't protest on the street. And there's also these protocols in the institutions of what can be said and can't be said. And they do want peace. They do want progressive change, but it's up to Russians to change the situation in their country. They don't want foreign interference. They do want to have transnational links. They do want to have cooperation with between civil society and other countries. And I also just want to emphasize that I talked to people from all walks of life, from students, professors, service people, Rotarians, activists, feminists, and people young and old about the situation. And I would like to convey their perspectives. I also want to say that I do have a PowerPoint presentation, but later in our discussion, I'll show you some slides because I think I have some good slides to show you. So thank you for letting me share that. And many Russians are going on with their lives. They're working, they're getting on with their lives, but they are deeply worried, and they want this conflict to end.
Yeah, thank you, Tamara. I think, Reiner, if I'm looking in your face, you would like to answer.
No,
comment.
In the Russian societies, there are quite different opinions to the war. There is maybe a minority, but I met them, which are absolutely supporting the war of Putin and even want to strengthen the war. It is by the nationalists in the Duma, and I have to say, it's a tragedy, but the truth, this is also by the communists, by the majority of the Communist Party, which really want to deepen the war and want to send more troops and. This is definitely also a feeling in the society, and Tamara gave arguments for that. Now, if these arguments are always true, and if these arguments are allowing for an invasion in another country, this is for me in the minimum an open question. Personally, I say no to this. Second is, there is this part of the society which is saying, please, let's come so quick as possible to an end of the war. We know that both sides are making mistakes. Our side is also making mistakes, but definitely the Western side, Tamara described what all the parts of the mistakes of the Western side. This is a little bit more a neutral position. And don't forget that this position and the anti-war position is under huge, huge pressure by the media. To say it very easy, the Russian media are the same like ours, but only with a vice versa position. Absolutely the same. So to find an independent and anti-war position, to say no to war, is really a courageous act. And I'm very happy that there are people, really engaged people, which are doing this, protesting, working for that, making public affairs. And they have it very, very difficult under the undemocratic authoritarian situation, which is now in Russia. And, you know, we are also partly responsible for this authoritarian situation, because always in a war situation, authoritarian structures will be dominated. So but, you know, you asked the question do you see the war day to day? No. You know, I think Tamara was also going to the streets. People are going shopping. The streets are light. You have the Christmas lights and everything. It's very nice. But you can see it. I will give you also one example. When I was coming to Moscow in the night, I was traveling with the metro to my home, and this metro was empty. I never saw an empty metro in Moscow, never in my life. And I asked the question, why is the metro is empty? They were telling me, you know, many people are staying home. Go to the theaters or to the cinemas and to parties is dramatically reduced. Because of this atmosphere, let's stay home. You don't want to go out. It's not the time for party. This is only also an impression. I can also tell you vice versa, that there are parties by young people which are really overwhelmed parties, but this is also a reaction to the situation we are facing now. So there is not one impression from the whole society. You cannot see it by the streets, you cannot see it by the shopping, you cannot see it by the metro, by nothing. Everything is working quite normal. But I can only underline what I was saying. When you're speaking with people which are working in the different fields at university, technical faculties, or in this Academy of Science, working more or less for peace research, or they tell you the difficulties of the Russian industry for the future. And one example, Renault was selling back his company to Russian owners for €1. And Russia developed now a new Moskvich. Maybe the older one of you will remember Moskvich. This was one of the traditional old, never destroyed cars of Moscow. But so the production, also the Western cars are reducing. It is difficult to get new Western cars because there is no trade any longer about that. So they have to go back to their own production. And maybe they will be at the end successful to do it because such a big country with such big resources, but it will be not so quick and not so easy, and it costs money. And Putin was announcing—
Is there possibilities to ask questions here? I found it rather annoying with these monologues.
We have a Q&A session later.
It is a little bit unpolite to interrupt someone. Maybe you can put your question in the chat and then we will answer it. So, and no, I will stop it.
It's a pity that you stop now, but I will go on in the program, and I had some other questions also prepared, but first we should go now to a Q&A session to this part, and I would like that you use the Zoom functionality, raise your hand, and then I would like to ask that please be short, maximum 3 minutes, that a lot of us can have the chance to make comments, questions, or what else they want to say. Agneta.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is if anybody in this group has read how it all started in Ukraine, Flashpoint in Ukraine. The undertitle is How the US Drive for Hegemony Risks World War III. It was written in 2014 to underline that the US was starting this war and continue to do that. I hear very little about Ukrainians, about Russians who have I think it was in April, suggested a peace accord. But the West, European Union and United States refused. It was Obama administration, I think, also in the beginning, that refused to discuss any peace settlement. Is this correct, or have you any other information which has not reached me?
Okay, thank you, Agneta, for this questions. I would like to ask others if they have a comment, then we can give it back directly. I see no others, so who will answer first? Tamara or Reiner? It's up to you.
Tamara, please, the floor is to you.
Oh, well, Agneta, I would just like to add to your suggestion for a reading, and that is the book by Stephen Cohen that came out in 2019 called War with Russia, From Putin and Ukraine to Trump and Russiagate. I think it's absolutely required reading. Stephen Cohen was the preeminent expert on the Soviet Union and Russia. He died 2 years ago, the year before he passed away. He published this important and prescient book. And in fact, the year before he passed away, he also resigned in protest from the Council on Foreign Relations, which is considered one of the most prestigious bodies on American foreign affairs, because of how they were fomenting this new Cold War against Russia. So I would just like to add to what you said, Agneta. We need to do more education on ourselves about the adverse impact that our countries, that NATO has in this conflict. And I really believe that if we want to end this conflict, we need to put pressure on our own governments to stop sending weapons and to support a ceasefire and negotiations. Reiner, go ahead.
Thank you. You know, the webinar is about our impressions from the trip, and I will continue on my impressions on the trip, because, you know, we had several discussions, several webinars about Russia and who is responsible for the invasion or not responsible. I don't want to repeat this in this webinar, because I really would like to inform you a little bit about some impressions we had. And let me say 2 or 3 interesting points for my impressions from the discussions. And I think, first of all, is Russia is developing itself in a new phase. Russia was, after 1919, also in the beginning of Putin, developed as a more or less neoliberalistic capitalistic country with a huge trade with the Western countries, importing the majority of the products, even in the agriculture field, but above all by high technology. These changed dramatically. Now, and this starts in 2014, and now you can see the positive results. Russia is totally autark in all the agriculture products. Even it can export a lot of grain to other countries. So this makes Russia independent from Europe and is definitely helping the actual situation. The second point is that Russia is now trying, by their own scientific research, and you know, the science and technology of Russia and their engineers has still a high quality, to develop an independent industrial development with also on high tech quality. And they are doing this and try to do this today together with China. And this is the third point of impression from the new developments. The Russian view, and we Germans know this, was always to West. When Putin was speaking in the German parliament, he offers to Germany to be the biggest supporter and helper by the Russian modernization of their country. Now, there's tremendously shift of this view. Russia is looking to the East. They are doing this not because they want to do this. And they are really, many of them are also not happy with it. But this is the new way of development. By trade, by scientific contact, by exchange, by exports, including arms export, they are looking absolutely to Asia. And this also means a new development for Siberia. They put a lot of more money for the development of Siberia than they have done it ever before. These are really some, maybe for also you, interesting news for this development. And you know, the oil export to India was 300% higher in 2022 than in the year 2021. And we can make a lot of more of these examples, but this shows a new development. And for me, this is not a positive development, because Russia, for me, is a part of Europe and a part of this common house of Europe. So this is only to underline what Tamara also was saying, that we definitely need these ceasefire and negotiations, and we need a new peace architecture in Europe, including Russia. And this is the opposite what the NATO politicians, Canadian, Germans, and want. So this is a huge challenge we are facing.
Yeah, I have now two hands up. One is Laura, and then, of course, Tamara. And I think we should come to, yes, more or less to the end of this first part, and then could go to the second part with other impressions and really.
Oh, Ingeborg, Christine, you have not seen Ingeborg. I saw Ingeborg's hand.
Okay, I haven't seen it, but then Ingeborg also may speak again, or may speak. But first, Laura.
Hi, I just have a quick question. When I was speaking to people who in Russia who were opposed to the war, I mean, I'm going to assume they have a strong sense and appreciate the sense to which Ukraine was becoming a de facto member of NATO, if not de jure, all the machinations that have gone on in the past year and before. And I don't know if they're aware that a government document was signed with the US in late 2021 to help them retake Crimea. This was brought to my attention recently. And so I'm wondering if they are aware of all those things, and if they had some thoughts then. I mean, did they feel endangered by that? And did they have some thoughts on what could have been done alternatively to war? Like, did they not feel that they were so provoked by that that they didn't have to take any action? Or could they see alternative actions that would have, they felt, been fruitful?
Thank you, Laura. And now I would like to ask Ingeborg and then Tamara, if you agree, Tamara. Ingeborg.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both, Tamara and Reiner. I highly appreciate what you are saying. Two very short questions, because I think we should have time to discuss how do we work more constructively and forcefully to have this ceasefire that we absolutely want to obtain. But the two questions are, Reiner, when we went last to Moscow, we were under the umbrella, so to say, of the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. Did you meet with them, and what is on the present situation? And the second question is, as for Nord Stream, what are people saying about the Nord Stream disaster, I would say? Thank you.
Thank you, Ingeborg. I think Tamara should answer, and then Reiner, and then we will go to the second part, and Tamara.
So just quickly, I want to affirm what Reiner said about Russia turning east towards Asia. You could really see that at the university. There were lots of notices up about webinars and seminars about Asia. There were some Asian, exchange students there. They had a big exhibit on China while I was there. The MIGIMO University that I was at, the Moscow State University for International Relations, is the largest, most prestigious one in the country. And they were telling me that not only do all the students have to learn English, but they also have to master a third language, one of 54 countries, one of 54 languages, and many of them are learning Asian languages. So that was very evident there. And then I also wanted to acknowledge that families, even families in Russia, the ones that I spoke to, are divided. It tends to be the older generation that, you know, is very supportive of Russia's so-called special military operation, and younger ones tend not to be. Somewhat that divide isn't perfect, but many young men have left the country. I talked to quite a number of people who have had brothers or uncles who are in Georgia, or, you know, tried to get to Finland, for example. And I was really impressed with the students at the university. They were offering, you know, suggestions about what could be done. They were so sophisticated and so well thought out. You know, they were talking about, well, couldn't Canada be example? You have a federal system with Quebec, a French-speaking province. You know, couldn't that have helped in Ukraine? And you know, they talked about Canada's Truth and Reconciliation process with Indigenous people. Couldn't that be something that could be done? You know, I was just really so impressed. They put forward a number of alternatives, you know, to this war. They want it to end. And then also I want to mention about the issue of climate change. I also shared with them my concern about climate change and how essential it is for us to work cooperatively with Russia and China on the climate emergency. And Canada and you know, Russia, we share this Arctic, we share this boreal forest. While Siberia was burning out of control 2 years ago, the Canadian boreal forest was also burning out of control. So Russians are starting, you know, to feel the heat. They are starting to be very concerned about climate change, but they did admit to me that their government doesn't talk a lot about climate change, but they are worried. They're also worried about pollution. And, you know, they want to work cooperatively on environmental and climate challenges. And then one thing that one experience that I had that's really had a huge impact on me is that of being on the Sapsan train, the high-speed train between Moscow and St. Petersburg that goes 4 times a day. Canada does not have 1 kilometer of high-speed rail. We have one of the busiest, most dangerous highways, the 401, through Ontario. We don't have any high-speed rail. I was on a train that had incredible comfort, service, and gourmet food for $150 Canadian. I could not believe it. And, you know, Russians have been investing in their infrastructure, in public transit. And that's what we need to be doing instead of investing in this militarism and increasing our military spending. So we actually have a lot to learn from Russia, and we need to be working together on dealing with the climate crisis, the poverty crisis, and our other global challenges.
Thank you, Tamara.
Not that I'm proud of Germany, but this train was built by Siemens. No, it was one of these offers after 2001 for modernizing the Russian society with Western help in relation to energy project to oil and gas from Russia. That was the business. That was the background of the speech of Putin in the German parliament, where all the parliamentarians were standing up and making spontaneous long applause. There's 60% of them are the same, which are now making all these wars and accusation against Russia. So this shows that we have to what we have to come back. Shortly to answer Ingeborg. Ingeborg, the Rosa Luxemburg office is closed, like all the offices of all the foundations, including the foundation of the Left Party, because of this agent theory. And our colleagues, which we met at that time, our German colleagues, which were all working in the office, are now back in Germany, and they are deeply unhappy with the situation. And hopefully the office will be opened again. Yeah, we will see. The second, Nord Stream, you know, the only discussion you can have in Canada, in Russia about Nord Stream, I think Tamara will have the same experience, if that there are discussions which secret service has done it. And then you can make a list. Some of them are saying CIA, the majority is say M6, and yeah, some of them are even saying Mossad. So you can have a discussion about the secret services, which makes this incredible attack.
Sweden was also around there.
Yeah,
it
Sweden
come
was,
out.
but Sweden don't have the technical equipment to that. So the technical equipment only has several secret services, above all M6. So maybe, but we will see. The future will describe this. So you know, then I would say one sentence. Never, please, I never would say the sentence, there is no alternative to war. Never. There is always an alternative to war. I think this is I'm deeply convinced about that. And when I'm discussing this to the situation in Ukraine and around Ukraine, I would like to say one sentence before to recognize the relations between Ukraine and Russia. There are 20 million families where on the minimum one part of the family is coming either from Ukraine or from Russia. So they are deeply divided. No, there are many families which have Ukrainians as wives, men, and in the family. So this is also shows that the Russians are still speaking about the brother people in Ukraine, das Brudervolk. So that shows how also deeply hurt these conflicts to the soil of these people in Russia. So it is really deeply also an internal conflict in them. And when you ask me what they are saying, what are the alternatives? There is also a very controversial alternative discussion about it. Some are saying, you know, they should protect the two republics at that time, the two people's republic. They should protect these borders much more. Some are saying they should continue with negotiations and discussions with the West. Some of them are saying they should try to develop stronger contacts to the Asian countries, above all to China, and to deepen their military alliance with the former Soviet Union republics. Some of them are saying they should develop and strengthen their army and develop a better missile defense system at the border against the weapons of the West. So there is not a unified answer to these questions, but there is part of them are military answers, part of them are more political answers. All of them are in the discussion. But again, please never say there is no alternative to war. This is you should never say this. And a last sentence to ceasefire. Even a ceasefire will not bring us back to the situation before. We need a new European peace architecture. And this is also mainly our responsibility. We have to develop it, we have to open it, we have to develop suggestions. And you know, we have Finnish colleagues here. I think we have the year 2025 with 50 years Helsinki Agreement. And I think till that year, we should be strong enough to develop a new peace architecture in Europe. And I think this is, next to ceasefire, a key challenge for all of us, where we should think about it. And my last sentence to climate change. I think Tamara mentioned quite right, this Russian society starts understanding the problems of climate, but starts understanding. There is not such an environmental understanding in the society, maybe like in the German society. Because the main point is that the system, the economic system, is deeply depending, and the income of Russia is deeply depending on fossil fuels. And to change this is not an action from today to tomorrow. And it is very difficult, and it will not work without cooperation with other countries. So the question of environment and climate change becomes a bigger question in the society, but it is always a minority discussion in the society. And to strengthen this is also a challenge and a responsibility for us. And we definitely should discuss deeper with our Russian colleagues and friends about the environmental challenges we are facing.
Thank you, Reiner, for this answer. I would now like to ask Tamara to show some slides and also go over to the second part with the impressions from your surrounding countries you visit, and especially with Bucharest, where the foreign minister meetings took place at the end of November.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to show a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to go very, very quickly through these slides. So I went to, 6 countries in 4 weeks. I only scratched the surface, but I'll just show you a few slides really quickly. So here's a nice picture of Moscow. So beautiful. I was so impressed in the Red Square. And this was out on the street at a bus stop, and this is encouraging young men, of course, to mobilize to join the Russian military. And then at one of the train stations, I saw lots of young Russian men, going off to serve. I met with one of the editors of the online magazine Russia and Global Affairs. It's done in Russian and in English, so it's a source of the Russian perspective. This is a nice picture of the students at MIGIMO. And I told you some of the things that I shared with them and my interpretation of this conflict, seeing it in 3 different layers. I don't have time for that. Of course, I shared with you one of the resources, and I told you what the students showed me. Just quickly to what Reiner said about the 1990s being this decade of humiliation and despair, when after the Soviet Union collapsed and Russia was transitioning with this American democracy, and neoliberalism is very much enabled by Russia. There was this amazing painting that was done by a famous Russian artist called Ilya Glazunov, called The Market of Our Democracy, done in 1999. And it's an excellent social commentary of this period. But many Russians told me about the 1990s being a time of hunger and homelessness for them. So the past 20 years under the Putin administration, things really improved dramatically. And you can see that with the World Bank statistics. Life expectancy increased, poverty decreased, employment went up, the GDP went up. So you can see that Russians' standard of living has definitely improved. This is a meeting that I had with members of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, and these, beautiful restaurants and chic cafes are all full and busy. The Russians did say to me, this group, that they are working very hard on nuclear disarmament, but of course there isn't support right now for Russians giving up their nuclear weapons, because of this conflict, and of course NATO nuclear weapons and missile defense on their border. This is at the Red Square. And this is that Sapson train that I was telling you about that is incredible, that I wish would come to Canada. This is in St. Petersburg, and at the Hermitage, the largest museum of art and culture in the world. It was absolutely magnificent. And these were some members of a peace activist, retired biologist, and a philosophy professor at the university, at the local university. We had a 7-hour meeting, talked about a range of issues. And I told them that I had this sign that I was bringing with me, "No to NATO, yes to peace and cooperation." And right when I unfurled it and showed it to them, this man, jumped up, grabbed my hand and said, "Yes, I totally agree with you." And this is the sign that I brought with me on my travels to the various countries. And this is in Helsinki with Leah and Ula and Ati. It was absolutely fantastic. And I went to the Peace Education Center and I gave a talk with the other sign that I have, "Peace for Climate Justice, Stop the Wars, Stop the Warming." And I just want to show you quickly, I can't go through all of my experience here, but just a few important highlights that relate to our work with the No to NATO network. And this is in right outside of Riga. This is at Camp Adazi. This is where Canada is leading a NATO battle group. It's part of the enhanced forwarding presence. And this is a multinational NATO training site. And I stood with my banner outside at the front. I went to go and have a look around. I spoke to some of the soldiers, and I left a letter to the Canada's commanding leader there to say that I'm opposed to what's going on. This is some of the training that takes place. So this is an image from the NATO website back in the spring, this big exercise that was taking place. And, you know, just have a quick look at the landscape. You know, these vehicles, these tanks and these Hummers and these missile launchers, helicopters that are on the landscape. And this is a satellite image that I took, and you can see how the forest is totally decimated here. And actually, timber is an export resource for Latvia, but it's not coming from this area. This forest is totally decimated and, you know, and no doubt contaminated. So you can see that. And I met with one of the activists in Wrocław, Poland, who is very concerned about the NATO militarization in her country. And I really think that we should organize a seminar in the spring. I have a good contact there. And I learned a lot about what NATO is doing in the country. And I also met with some Ukrainian refugees. And maybe towards the end of this call, if I have an opportunity, I will tell you more about what I heard from these Ukrainian refugees. But I do want to speak very quickly about the NATO foreign ministers meeting in Bucharest. This was held on the 29th and 30th of November. And I arrived in the capital the day before on the 28th. And I walked around the parliamentary palace where the foreign ministers meeting was being held. And if you look closely, you can see this crumbling fence. And across the street is the Department of Defense for Romania, and there is a very big monument for NATO. This is on a main street in the capital, right across from the parliamentary palace. And around the city, there were these NATO flags flying everywhere, and there are these billboards, you know, "We are NATO," all over the city. And this was the luxury hotel, the Marriott, right across the street where the foreign ministers of the 30 NATO members were staying. And there was a huge police presence all around this hotel, all around the parliamentary palace. And they just took a shuttle from the hotel directly into the palace, and they had their meeting. And so this is inside meeting, you know, it's very luxury. And there's from the Twitter feed, while Canada's foreign minister, Melanie Joly, was wining and dining with her colleagues, there you can see German and the Italian ministers wining and dining and having a great time. Right across the street is this dilapidation. It was shocking to me to see the disrepair and despair in Bucharest. I was absolutely shocked. And I heard from many people in Romania that there is increasing poverty. People are struggling to make ends meet. And during time of this NATO meeting, the president of Romania said that Romania is going to increase military spending from 2% of GDP to 2.5% of GDP. Military spending has gone up dramatically. The people are suffering. NATO and American capitalism, Western capitalism, is squeezing this country dry, and you can see that. And then at the end of this meeting, the big announcement that was made was that NATO members are going to continue to send weapons to Ukraine to prolong this war, to prolong the suffering. And then, of course, they have China in their sights. And so NATO is globalizing. We need to stop it. We need to work together to abolish NATO. I stood outside with my sign, "No to NATO, yes to peace and cooperation," but I was promptly detained and told that I was not able to protest. And then on my last day, December 1st, was when there was a big military parade, and American soldiers and American flags were in this parade, and you can see that there's a rocket launcher here, and the man next to me said this is the type of rocket launcher that's being used by Ukraine right now against the people in the Donbass. And then I just want to show you these two maps really quickly. I mean, look at all of the soldiers and tanks and warships that are on Russia's border. And now all of the bombers and the planes that are on the border. You know, this is why I was talking to the Russians about strategic empathy. You know, think about how the Russians feel about all of this militarism on their border. And then, of course, this military spending, you know, in our NATO countries that are diverting resources away from social welfare and climate action. And then what I did is just two more slides here, but I took this map and I made these arrows showing the linkages between friends and family of all of the people that I spoke to in Russia and in the 5 or the 3 Eastern countries or 4 Eastern countries that I went to. Showing the interconnections between all of the people. You know, it's unbelievable. And NATO is sowing this division, hostility, and hatred. But the people are so connected and interdependent. And so what we need to be doing is strengthening these connections, building these bridges of peace and friendship. And so these are some of my final observations. I just think that you know, we need to end this conflict. We need to work cooperatively with Russia and China on our common challenges. And I refuse to treat Russia or China as enemies. I want peace in Ukraine. I want peace with all countries. Our only hope is global solidarity. And NATO is the biggest impediment of that. And we need to abolish NATO and build bridges of peace. And the first person that I spoke to when I got back is I contacted Yuri in Kiev, and I talked to him about what I learned and what I saw. And he said to me, Tamara, what a great experience and opportunity you have. We need to challenge the system. We need to change the regime of militarism in all of our countries, everywhere. We need a nonviolent way of life. We need peace education and peace building everywhere. So that's all, friends. Some resources to share with you. We can put this up on the website, and the ways that we can build common security and common prosperity. And of course, as Christine suggested in the chat, please sign the important IPB Christmas appeal for peace in Ukraine. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tamara. And if you send me the presentation, I will put the slides on the website and everyone can see it. And maybe you can also cover the faces from the surrounding tables. They are not involved with you, but you never know what the secret services are doing. So if we will publish them, make them all white, please. And yes, we have some minutes left for some comments, questions, or anything else. I don't see so. Then I see there are a lot of comments also in the chat. You are able to save the chat so you can keep the information, and it's not necessary that you write it down. And if there is no hands up, oh, Huari.
Hi. If I could just ask one quick question. My name is Rory, and I'm from Ireland, and studying in Sweden actually. And I'm just doing university projects, and the focus is the exploring peace connected to the Ukraine-Russian war. And my basic question, no need to answer now, I might send you an email, is just if I'm looking for collaborators in my project, just to get more of an idea, because I'm not someone who has much of an idea about this whole project. I'm just looking for collaborators to help me frame my project as an exploration. So maybe I'll send you an email, and I'm just wondering if that would be possible for me to kind of maybe touch base and just you might be able to guide me in some direction, because I'm a graphic designer, but with a political slant, and that's you might be able to guide me, is what I'm looking for.
you please contact IPB, and my young colleagues will definitely contact you. They are happy to have such partners in
Yes,
their work because they are always looking for new ideas and new suggestions.
and please also contact the NATO network. We are also looking for people who help us to make share pics and all this stuff. I will write my email in the chat afterwards.
How do you pronounce your name?
Rory.
Rory. Yeah, Christine put in the chat, make sure that you stay connected to the NATO network. We would love to have your graphic design abilities to get our messages out on social media. So we would love to have assistance with that. And I also put my email in the chat to you and to everybody. If you'd like a copy of my slides or my resources, or you know, I'd be happy to connect and share what I have with you. And then I also just want to add that I am worried about the pressure on Ireland to join NATO. And I think that we need to work now to prevent that. I'm concerned about some of the things that the Irish government is saying about NATO and about what's going on. And I feel like Ireland might be next after Finland and Sweden. And I also think that we need to start working on peace building throughout Eastern Europe and also to plan for the NATO summit in Vilnius. We need to start sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for all the encouragement to reach out and touch base, and you'll certainly be seeing an email from me soon. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Reiner, your final words?
You know, my final words is I think we need the next webinar we should do again with our peace activists in Russia and Ukraine. I think we should continue our discussion about voices for peace from Russia and Ukraine. And I'm very happy that I had a discussion today with a group of feminist voices for peace, that they are strong enough and they feel they are safe enough to make again a webinar with us. And Yuri also agreed. So I think it is very important that we keep these contacts and this understanding as peace activists, that we are working together for peace and continue and enlarging our fight for ceasefire and negotiations.
I think it also would be important to have people from Donetsk. I'm in another network, and we talk together with people in Donetsk and Luhansk about their situation. It is very fruitful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Agneta. And now I see no other hands up, so I think we should close the meeting here now. And of course,
Sorry,
Christina, I think Vanessa has her hands up.
sorry, I don't see it. Please use the Zoom function for hands up. Then you also will get in the pictures in the front. And yeah, Vanessa, okay. Go on.
Thank you. Sorry, I was actually just going to ask a question that Reiner ended up answering, which was, were you able to foster deeper connections with some of the feminist peace activists in Russia? And if we could maybe explore those from a bottom up peace building activity, such as a webinar, but you know, maybe doing other things as well.
Yeah. Maybe you should have in mind that this is a very decentralized network, which is all over Russia. These are about now between 1,500 and 2,000 women from very different parts of Russia, including Siberia, including the big cities in the Siberian area. So it is also not so easy to communicate with them. And the other side is that they're also under quite strong pressure from the government, the regional governments and the central government. So it is also not so easy, but I hope that we have a new webinar with them at the end of January. We are planning to have it, and hopefully it works. And yeah, we are trying our best to enlarge the context to them.
And can I just say something really quickly, that I want to encourage you to all plan a trip to Russia and to other other countries in Eastern Europe to make these connections, to start building these bridges of peace. I'm really concerned about the growing Russophobia throughout the region. In Latvia, for instance, they're trying to pass laws to prevent people speaking Russian, even though most of the people in Latvia speak Russian. And they have family in Russia, and we saw this in Ukraine. We're seeing this in Poland. Russians have experienced violence even against children at schools. So we have to think about that as well. And I would love for us to be creative and doing something like peace trains or peace buses throughout the region. Like let's do something. We need to do something big scale, creative, well, on all scales, the small and the big. But I would love for us to do something like peace walks, peace trains, peace buses, having webinars on peace. There is a lack of these initiatives in the region. The NATO presence, the Atlantic Council, the German Marshall Fund, the NATO military bases are very strong, and we need to make our presence known to the people, and we need to support all of those courageous voices throughout the region who are working on peace and disarmament and demilitarization, not just in Russia, but in Poland, in Latvia, in Ukraine, right throughout the region, right across Europe.
Yeah, thank you, Tamara. I thank you all for attending this webinar, and I promise this will not be the last webinar. The previous webinars you can find on the No to NATO website, and also on the IPB and the YouTube channel of IPB. And so you can also see them again if you missed them. And we will continue this with the proposal Voices from Russia for Peace. And also we will have a network, No to NATO network meeting in end of January to prepare our protest action against the NATO summit in June in Vilnius, Lithuania. And I think it's very complicated because the peace movement is very weak in the Baltic countries, and we should see what we can do for this. And so I hope that you know that we really get success with our call for Christmas peace in remembrance of the peace celebration 1914. And please sign the appeal, distribute it, and then yeah, also request this from others, and request from our government to start negotiations without preconditions to come to a ceasefire. I think this is the most important thing we can do now. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Christine. Get involved in the No to NATO network. Abolish NATO. Yes to peace and cooperation. No to NATO. Yes to peace and cooperation. We can do it, friends. Let's stick together.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Willst du noch drin bleiben, Christine?
Ja, kann ich machen, wenn die anderen rausgehen.
Ja, ja, die gehen.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
So. Nun sind wir alleine hier drin. Rainer, den Rest habe ich
Ja,
im
ich sehe.
Warteraum geschickt. Und nein, war doch ganz gut.
War doch nicht schlecht besucht.
Ja. Naja, na gut, die Hälfte von den Angemeldeten.
Ja, gut.
Aber das sind, glaube ich, ist einfach immer unsere.
Also über 40 Leute für so ein Webinar ist doch nicht schlecht.